Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
When the judge read out the sentence, 6 years in prison for large-scale fraud, my 42-year-old son Diego clutched his chest right there in the courtroom. He thought I was a senile old man, but I had just exposed his grand scheme. For 2 months, I pretended to be losing my memory, installed hidden cameras, kept secret notes. This is the story of how I, a 75-year-old father, tested my children for greed, and the results surpassed my worst fears. My name is Miguel Martinez, and at 75, I considered myself a happy man. I had a successful business, 2 grown children, 4 grandchildren, and enough money to provide for my family for several generations. But life, as we know, loves to throw surprises and not always pleasant ones. My story began when my wife passed away. Carmen died of cancer 3 years ago, and the blow nearly broke me. We had lived together for 47 years. She wasn't just my wife, but my partner, advisor, and support. After her death, the world seemed dimmer, drained of color. For the first few months, I hardly left the house. My son Diego and my daughter Lucia took turns visiting me, cooking meals, cleaning. They cared for me as best they could. I was grateful and thought I could peacefully grow old surrounded by loving children. By that time, my business had grown into a sizable empire. Back in the 80s, I started with a tiny workshop repairing radios in the basement of our old house in a working-class neighborhood. I worked nights after my factory shift. Carmen helped. She kept track of orders, spoke with clients, handled the money. By the early 90s, I already had a small electronics shop. During those difficult years when many lost their way because of the economic crisis, I didn't falter. I expanded, opened new outlets, built ties with suppliers. By the 2000s, the Electron chain had 12 stores across the city, a warehouse of 3,000 square meters, and a service center with 50 employees. Diego, my eldest, graduated in economics and joined the firm at 25. He started as a manager, then became warehouse head and later commercial director. Lucia chose a different path. She became a pediatrician, married a surgeon named Carlos, and had 2 children. She never got involved in the family business, saying, "Dad, you have Diego, and I have my own work." After Carmen's death, I devoted more time to my children, invited them over more often, took an interest in their lives. And that was when I began to notice oddities in Diego's behavior. The first alarm bell rang in May last year. Diego came to my house with a bottle of tequila and a cake, supposedly to celebrate another successful deal. We sat, talked business, had a drink. Then unexpectedly, my son asked, "Dad, where do you keep all the company documents?" "Why do you ask?" I was surprised. "Oh, just curious. You never know. What if something needs to be found while you're away?" "In the safe, of course. But why?" "Just in case. And do you remember the safe code?" The question struck me as odd. I had set the code 10 years ago and never changed it. Carmen's birthday, 1503. Diego knew it. I'd told him many times. "Of course I remember. Why, do you have memory problems?" I joked. Diego laughed, but awkwardly. No, I just wanted to make sure you still remember. At our age, you never know." "At our age? You're 42, not 75. "Yeah, sure, I meant your age." After that conversation, I was left uneasy. Why would Diego need to ask such things? Could it be he doubted my memory? A week later came the second episode. I went to the office. The main shop was on the ground floor of our building, with the office upstairs, and saw Diego talking to an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. When he noticed me, Diego quickly ended the conversation and the man left. "Who was that?" I asked. "A supplier, a new one, offering a batch of phones at a good price." But something in his tone alarmed me. He answered too quickly without meeting my eyes. In the weeks that followed, I noticed more changes. Diego began coming into my office more often, showing interest in documents, asking about bank accounts. And he did it all as if on the sly, as though he didn't want to draw attention. One morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual and found him at my desk. He was writing in a notebook with open folders of contracts beside him. "What are you doing?" I asked. Diego flinched, quickly closed the notebook. "Oh, Dad, you startled me. I'm just checking the contract with Samsung. I think there's an error in the amount." "And you couldn't figure it out without me?" "Of course I could. I just wanted to double-check everything so there won't be problems later. His explanation sounded reasonable, but something still bothered me. Diego had been working with those contracts for years. He knew them as well as I did. Why would he need to rewrite anything in a notebook? And then, a few days later, I overheard a phone call between Diego and his wife. He didn't know I had returned to the office and was speaking rather loudly. "Patricia, I'm serious. Father's been acting strange lately. Sometimes he forgets where he put his keys or can't recall a supplier's name. Yesterday, he even called our accountant Marta by the wrong name. Rosa." I froze. That was a lie. I remembered every name perfectly, never mixed anyone up, never lost my keys. Diego was simply lying to his wife. But why? "No, he still refuses to see a doctor," my son continued. "He says everything's fine, but I can tell his memory is slipping. I'm afraid he might do something foolish with the business." I couldn't take it any longer and walked into the office. Diego quickly ended the call. "All right, Patricia, we'll talk at home. Dad just came in." "What were you talking about?" I asked. "Oh, just family stuff. Patricia was asking when we'll come visit you." Another lie. And at that moment I realized something was wrong. Diego was deliberately spreading rumors about my memory problems, though I had none. Why would he do that? The next weeks I lived in a state of constant alertness. I listened carefully to every word my son said, watched his behavior, analyzed every action, and the more I observed, the more convinced I became. Diego was plotting something. He grew more insistent about the financial side of the business. He asked to see bank statements, lease agreements, property documents. He explained it all as concern for the company. "Dad, I'm your deputy. I have to know everything, so I can cover for you if necessary." "Cover for me in what case?" I asked. "Well, if you get sick or go on vacation." But I could see that wasn't it. Diego studied the documents too closely, copied things down, photographed pages with his phone. He did it secretly, thinking I didn't notice. Worse, he began spreading rumors among the staff about my forgetfulness. He claimed I mixed up names, missed meetings, repeated the same questions. Utter nonsense. But people started looking at me differently, with pity, with sympathy. Gloria, my secretary of 15 years, once cautiously asked, "Don Miguel, are you feeling all right? Diego says you've been getting tired lately." "Where did he get that idea?" I asked him, surprised. "Well, he worries about you. He said he's noticed certain signs." "What signs?" Gloria hesitated. "That you sometimes forget things. But of course, that's normal at your age." I was furious. What the hell was my son doing, discussing my health with employees and spreading lies? I decided to test my suspicions and stage a little provocation. I invited Diego into my office and said, "Son, I've been thinking, maybe it's time for me to gradually step back. I feel I don't have the same strength anymore. Do you want me to sign a power of attorney so you can run the company?" Diego's eyes lit up, though he quickly composed himself. "Dad, what are you saying? You're still in great shape. Why talk about stepping back?" "But you yourself said I'm starting to forget things." "I never said that," he objected too quickly. "Then why did Gloria tell me otherwise?" Diego hesitated. I just worry about you. I want you to take care of yourself." "I see, and you don't want the power of attorney?" "No, of course not. Why rush things?" But I could see he was lying. His eyes gleamed with excitement. His hands trembled slightly. The offer intrigued him, very much so. That same evening, I happened to overhear another phone call. "Perez, this is Diego Martinez." "Yes, Miguel's son. Listen, I need some legal advice. Can you come by tomorrow? Not to the office, better at home?" "Yes, it's about family matters." Perez, that was Rodrigo Perez, a lawyer I'd known for about 10 years. A decent professional, but not a cheap one. Why did Diego need a lawyer? The next day, I decided to follow my son. I waited until he left the office, then drove to his house. I parked a block away and watched. Around 7 in the evening, a car pulled up to Diego's home. Out stepped Perez, carrying a leather briefcase, clearly there on business. I waited half an hour, then dialed Diego's home phone. His wife, Patricia, answered. "Hello?" "Patricia, it's Miguel. Is Diego home?" "Yes, but he's busy right now." He's discussing something important. Can you call back later? Who's he talking to? Some lawyer. He came an hour ago. I see. Do you know what they're discussing? No, they're in the study with the door closed. It seems serious. So my suspicions were confirmed. Diego really was consulting a lawyer, and since the meeting was at home rather than the office, it had to be something personal. I decided to act. If my son was plotting something, I needed to find out what. And then a crazy idea struck me. What if I pretended to be ill? Gave Diego the chance to reveal his true intentions? I spent the whole night thinking it over. The idea was insane, but I had no other option. If Diego was indeed scheming, counting on my frailty, the best way to expose him was to give him exactly what he wanted, to pretend that I was losing my memory. The next morning, I weighed it all again. On the one hand, it was risky. What if I was wrong? What if Diego really was just worried about my health? Then my deception would only hurt him. On the other hand, there were too many strange things in his behavior. Lies about my forgetfulness, secret consultations with a lawyer, attempts to access documents. All of it added up to a certain picture. I made a decision. I would start pretending gradually, in small doses, and I would carefully watch my son's reaction. On Monday morning, I went to the office and staged the first scene. I met a new employee in the hallway, a young man hired 2 weeks earlier, named Pablo. I remembered perfectly well his name, his position, even his salary, but I pretended to forget. Sorry, young man, who are you? I don't seem to recall. Pablo looked embarrassed. I'm Pablo, I work in sales. We've already met. Ah, yes, of course, I remembered. Forgive me, my memory has been failing me lately. Diego, who was standing nearby, grew alert. Dad, what do you mean you don't remember Pablo? He's been here for 2 weeks. I remember, I waved him off. I just didn't recognize him right away, still half asleep. But I noticed the way my son exchanged glances with Pablo, in the flicker of strange satisfaction in his eyes. A couple of days later, I forgot my computer password. I sat at my desk, pressed a few keys, then threw up my hands. Damn it, I can't remember my password. Diego, help me. What password? He came over. For the computer. It's completely slipped my mind. Diego called the system administrator, and the guy restored my access. Meanwhile, I carefully watched my son's face. He tried to look worried, but couldn't quite hide his satisfaction. After the administrator left, Diego said, Dad, maybe you should take a break. Go somewhere, relax. No, it's nothing. Just a little tired. The password was simple, but I forgot. What password? Carmen 1503. Your mother's birthday. How could I forget that? Diego nodded, but I saw him remember the password. Why? Was he planning to use my computer? By the end of the week, I dared to stage a more serious symptom. I called in the chief accountant, Marta, a woman I had worked with for 7 years, and deliberately called her by another name. Rosa, could you show me last month's report? Don Miguel, she gently corrected. I'm Marta. Huh? I stumbled. Oh, of course, Marta. Forgive me, I got confused. The accountant looked at me with concern but said nothing. Diego, who was present, immediately jumped in. Dad, you're tired. Maybe you should go home. No, I'll keep working. Just a slip of the tongue. After Marta left, my son sat down across from me. Dad, I'm worried. You've been getting confused and forgetful lately. Maybe you should see a doctor. What doctor? Well, a general practitioner or a neurologist to check your memory. Nonsense, my memory is excellent. But you just called Marta by the wrong name. It was just a slip. Diego sighed. Dad, you don't want to admit it, but there's a problem. And the longer you ignore it, the worse it will get. There it was. Diego was actively pushing the idea of memory problems, even though I had none. That evening, I installed a voice recorder in my office. I decided to record all conversations that took place in my absence. The device was small. I hid it under my desk. And the very next day, I got my first results. On Thursday morning, I came to the office early, retrieved the recorder, and listened to the tapes. What I heard exceeded all my expectations. First recording, Diego speaking with my secretary, Gloria. Gloria, have you noticed how strangely my father has been behaving lately? Well, he's sometimes absent-minded. Not just absent-minded. Yesterday, he called Marta by the wrong name. And the day before that, he forgot his computer password. And it was the simplest password, the date of my mother's birthday. Maybe he's just tired. I'm afraid it's more serious. Looks like the early stage of dementia. My aunt had the same thing. First small lapses, then... My God, really? I'm not a doctor, of course, but the symptoms are similar. And the worst part is, he doesn't realize what's happening to him, refuses to see a doctor. And what will happen to the company? That's the problem. If my father completely, well, you understand, the business could suffer. He makes all the decisions alone. What if he starts making irrational ones? That's terrible. Yes, that's why I think I should take on more responsibility, to protect him, to make sure he doesn't ruin things. Second recording, a phone call with Perez. Hello, Perez. This is Diego. Yes, we agreed to meet. The situation is developing faster than I expected. My father really is ill. The symptoms are getting worse. Yesterday, he didn't recognize an employee. The day before, he forgot his password. No, he still refuses to see a doctor. What should I do in such a situation? I see. And if he starts making irrational business decisions? Yes, that's a risk. All right, come by tomorrow evening. We'll discuss it further. Third recording, Diego on the phone with his wife. Patricia, things are bad. Father's completely losing it. No, I'm not exaggerating. Today he confused the accountant with someone else. Yesterday he couldn't remember his own computer password. Dementia, no doubt about it. He won't go to a doctor, insists he's fine. What should we do? I don't know. Perez is coming tomorrow. We'll consult with him. Yes, we may have to declare him legally incompetent through the court. Horrible, of course, but what choice do we have? The main thing is to save the business before it's too late. The last phrase absolutely stunned me. Save the business! That meant Diego was already planning to seize control of the company by exploiting my supposed illness. I rewound the tape and listened to the recordings again. Everything was crystal clear. My son wasn't just spreading rumors about my memory problems. He was actively preparing to remove me from managing the business, and he was consulting a lawyer on how to do it. So my plan was working. Diego was revealing his true intentions, but I had to continue the act to gather full proof. I put the recorder back in place and decided to intensify the symptoms. Time to move to the next stage. The following week, I decided to add more serious memory lapses to my performance. If Diego expected the illness to progress, so be it, he would see progress. On Monday, I got lost in my own office. I stepped out of my office and pretended not to find the restroom. I stood in the hallway for about 3 minutes, looking around helplessly. Don Miguel, are you looking for something? The secretary approached. Well, I can't seem to remember where the restroom is. My head just isn't working at all, I said confusedly. Gloria walked me there, and afterward I overheard her on the phone with Diego. Diego, your father, he couldn't find the restroom in the hallway. Said his head wasn't working. Yes, I understand. All right, I'll tell him. On Tuesday, I staged the lost glasses trick. My glasses were on my head, but I spent half an hour looking for them, turning the office upside down. Where are my glasses? Where did they go? They were right here. Dad, Diego said as he walked in, the glasses are on your head. Huh? I acted surprised and touching my head. You're right. How did that happen? You put them there yourself. I don't remember. Strange. Diego studied me intently. Dad, let's go to a doctor, all right? I'll make you an appointment with a good neurologist. No need. I just forgot where I put my glasses. Happens to everyone. Not to everyone, and not this often. On Wednesday, I mistook my daughter for my late wife. Lucia came to visit me at the office, stepped into my office, and I greeted her. Carmen, darling, how wonderful that you came. I thought you were still upset with me. Lucia froze. Dad, I'm Lucia. Mom died 3 years ago. What? I concentrated. Lucia. Of course, Lucia. Forgive me, dear, I got confused. Tears welled up in my daughter's eyes. Dad, what's happening to you? You confused me with Mom. Nonsense, just a slip of the tongue. You know how much I miss her. But Lucia was shaken. After she left, Diego burst into my office. Dad, Lucia just called me. She said you mistook her for Mom. This is serious. Oh, come on, it was just a slip. That wasn't a slip. You really didn't recognize her? Of course I recognized her, just something misfired in my head. Diego sat down opposite me. Dad, stop being stubborn. You have memory problems. It's obvious. You need treatment. Treatment? I'm healthy. Healthy people don't confuse the living with the dead, my son said harshly. That sentence sounded like a verdict. Diego was no longer hiding his thoughts. That evening, I listened to the recorder again. Diego was calling around to doctors, consulting about dementia symptoms, asking about the procedure for declaring someone legally incompetent. From one conversation, I realized he had already met with a psychiatrist and described my symptoms in detail. The doctor suggested early-stage senile dementia and advised insisting on a full examination. And in a call with lawyer Perez, Diego was even more direct. Licenciado Perez, the situation is critical. Father has completely lost his mind. Today he confused his daughter with my late mother. Yes, serious impairment. He refuses to see a doctor. What should I do? Forced examination? Through the court? I see. And if in this state he starts selling property, giving away money? Yes, big risk. We have to act quickly. So Diego feared that I might give away money in a state of madness. In reality, he feared I might change my will or hand the business over to someone else. It was time to move to the decisive phase. A few days after the incident with Lucia, Diego came to me with a grave expression. Dad, I need to talk to you, seriously. About what? About your health? About our business? About the future? He sat across from me and spoke in the tone of a caring son. Dad, I can see you're struggling. Your memory is failing. Your concentration is slipping. It's normal at your age, but we can't ignore the problem. What problem? Are you really not aware? You mix up employees' names, forget passwords, get lost in your own office, and yesterday you mistook your daughter for Mom. I didn't mistake her, just a slip. Dad, Diego said gently, denial is also a symptom. Patients often don't understand what's happening to them. Patients? You think I'm sick? I think you need help, medical help. I pretended to take offense. I see. So the son thinks his father is insane. Not insane, just you're experiencing age-related changes. They're treatable if you start therapy in time. And if I don't, Diego paused, then said, then it will get worse. You could make mistakes in business, take wrong decisions, harm yourself, the company, and the family. And what do you propose? Undergo a medical evaluation, and in the meantime, transfer management of the business to me. Temporarily, of course, until you get better. There it was. At last, Diego had shown his hand. He wanted control of the company under the pretext of my illness. Transfer management, I repeated. Yes, sign a general power of attorney. That way, I'll be able to handle everything on your behalf while you focus on getting well. And if I don't want to get treated? Dad, Diego's voice took on a steely note. You must realize that in your condition, you can't make responsible decisions. What if you sign some unfavorable contract or sell property for a pittance? I would never sign anything unfavorable, but you don't even understand what you're signing. You're getting confused over the simplest things. Diego was speaking more confidently now, clearly convinced victory was near. That's why I suggest the power of attorney. For your own protection, I'll make the decisions and you'll live in peace without worrying about business. All right, I agreed unexpectedly. Let's draw up the power of attorney. Diego was stunned. Seriously? You agree? What choice do I have? If you believe I'm sick, if you think I could harm the business, better to entrust it to you. Dad, Diego was almost moved. You're making a wise decision. I'll do everything right, I promise. I believe you. Just make sure the contract is detailed, that all your powers are spelled out. Of course, I'll go to Perez tomorrow. He'll draft it properly. And don't forget to state that the power of attorney is issued because of my what you call illness, so there won't be any questions later. All right, I'll add that. Dad, you won't regret this. I'll run the company as well as you. Or even better, I thought, watching his burning eyes. The next day, Diego brought the finished documents. The packet was thick, a general power of attorney, consent for a medical examination, and some additional papers. Dad, here are the documents. Everything's legal. I took the first page, pretending to struggle with the small print. These letters are so tiny, hard to make out. Let me explain, Diego offered. This is the power of attorney for managing the business. It states you transfer to me all authority over company assets. All authority? Yes, signing contracts, opening accounts, making deals for efficient management. I see. In this one, I pointed to another document. Consent for a medical evaluation, so doctors can examine you properly. And what about this one? I tapped the third paper. This is, additional authority, so I can act in emergency situations? At home, I carefully read every document. What I discovered exceeded my worst expectations. The general power of attorney didn't just grant Diego managerial rights. It practically transferred all my property to him. He was authorized to sell, buy, mortgage, donate, do anything he wanted with my assets. The consent for medical examination turned out to be consent for involuntary hospitalization in a psychiatric clinic. And the additional authority included the right to change my bank details, close accounts, and transfer funds. In effect, by signing those papers, I would become a puppet in my son's hands. He could do whatever he wished, lock me up in a psychiatric hospital, sell everything, pocket the money. But I signed them anyway. I wanted to see this through, to find out just how far my son was willing to go. After the signing, Diego seemed to transform. The fake concern and sympathy vanished, replaced by briskness and authority. He began behaving like the rightful master. His first step was to change the office access codes. My own office was now locked, and the guard politely told me, "Sorry, Don Miguel, but Diego asked me not to let anyone in. He said there's an inventory of documents going on." Inventory? That's my office. I understand, sir, but those are the orders. I took offense and left. But in the evening, I slipped back in through the side entrance and activated the hidden cameras I had installed in advance. What I saw in the recordings turned suspicion into certainty. Diego was conducting a full audit of my documents. Together with lawyer Perez and a stranger I later learned was a property appraiser, they sorted through contracts, made lists of assets, and calculated valuations. The old man really built up a solid business, and Diego said. Assets worth 2 billion pesos, plus real estate another 1.5 billion. Not a bad catch. And what about your sister? The appraiser asked. She's an heir too. Lucia doesn't understand business. Besides, I'm now the legal manager. With this power of attorney, I can do anything I want. And what if your father recovers? Diego laughed. Recover? His dementia is advancing. In a month or two, he won't understand a thing. Then you can have him declared legally incompetent, Perez added, and apply for guardianship. Exactly. Meanwhile, with the power of attorney, we'll start optimizing the assets. Optimizing the assets. I didn't like the sound of that at all. During the following week, Diego launched a frenzy of activity. He met with bankers, talked to real estate agents, hosted various investors, and in every negotiation he spoke on my behalf, introducing himself as the authorized representative of an incapacitated father. I kept playing the role of the sick old man, but I closely monitored my son's actions, and what I discovered horrified me. Diego wasn't just managing the business, he was selling it off. In a single week, he had sold 3 out of 12 stores to some investors, taken out a 400 million peso loan secured by the office building, closed the company's main bank accounts and transferred the money to new accounts, fired longtime employees and hired new ones, his own people, started negotiations to sell the Electron brand itself. All of this was done under the pretense of business restructuring and improving efficiency. In reality, Diego was systematically siphoning off the assets, transferring them to structures he controlled. When I tried to intervene and ask questions about the store sales, my son brushed me off. Dad, don't worry your head. These are complicated financial operations you wouldn't understand in your condition. Trust me, I'm doing everything right. But why sell? The stores are profitable. They were profitable. The market has changed. We need to optimize. Better to sell at a good price now than take losses later. And where did the money from the sales go? Back into circulation. We're buying new equipment, expanding online sales. But I saw no new equipment, and we had already been in online trade for 5 years. Through my secretary, I learned that the proceeds from the store sales had gone into some new accounts opened by Diego, and the loan money had disappeared altogether. That's when I realized my son wasn't managing the business at all. He was outright robbing it, exploiting my supposed helplessness to seize all the property. It was time to end the charade. I knew that audio and video recordings alone wouldn't be enough. I needed official proof of my legal competence and of Diego's fraudulent actions. I turned to private investigator Eduardo Castro, a former prosecutor I had known for 10 years. I explained the situation and showed him the recordings. "This is serious, Don Miguel," Castro said. "Your son could face a heavy sentence for large-scale fraud, but it won't be easy to prove. Formally, he's acting under a power of attorney. And if the power of attorney was obtained through deception, then it's a different matter. But we'll need to prove you were fully competent and understood the consequences when you signed." Castro proposed a clear plan of action: undergo a full medical examination with independent doctors and obtain certificates confirming full mental competence, revoke the power of attorney through a notary, file a complaint with the prosecutor's office attaching all evidence, stage a public confrontation to capture Diego's reaction on record. "The most important thing," the detective said, "is to record the moment your son realizes you've deceived him. His reaction will be the best proof of criminal intent." We agreed that I would undergo a comprehensive exam at an independent clinic. Castro knew doctors who could perform all the necessary tests quickly and thoroughly. The examination took 3 days. I was examined by a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a general practitioner. They ran an EEG, a brain scan, countless memory and cognitive tests. The results were conclusive: full mental and physical competence, excellent memory, no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other disorder. "Incredible," the psychiatrist said. "At your age, such clarity of mind is rare. Your memory is better than that of many 40-year-olds. "Could there be problems you missed?" I asked. "Impossible. We conducted a complete diagnosis. If there were any impairments, we would have found them. Your psyche is absolutely healthy." Armed with medical certificates, I went to the notary. It was time to annul that cursed power of attorney. Notary Isabel Ramirez looked surprised. "Don Miguel, your son said you had memory problems. That's why the power of attorney was issued." "He was mistaken," I replied calmly. "As you see, my memory is excellent. I perfectly remember the date of the power of attorney, its contents, and the circumstances of signing. Then why revoke it? I have reason to believe it's being abused. Therefore, I'm canceling it effective today." The notary filed the revocation, and legally all of Diego's authority ceased. From that moment, any action he took in my name became illegal. The next step was to go to the prosecutor's office. I filed a fraud complaint attaching all the evidence, medical certificates, audio recordings, video materials, and documentation of the transactions. The duty prosecutor carefully studied the materials. "This is an interesting case, but we'll need additional evidence. For example, a confession from the accused or witnesses to his criminal intentions. And if I organize a meeting where he confesses everything himself, that would be ideal. The main thing is that everything must be recorded, and there must be witnesses present." It was time for the final act of the performance. I chose Monday morning for the exposure, when the entire management team gathered in the office for the weekly planning meeting. Diego, suspecting nothing, had convened it in the large conference hall. Present were the directors of the remaining stores, the chief accountant, department heads, the company lawyer, about 15 people. Diego acted like the undisputed master. Sitting at the head of the table, he reported on the new development strategy, restructuring plans, and growth prospects. "Thanks to optimization," he said, "we've rid ourselves of unprofitable assets and focused on the most profitable areas. In the coming months, we plan further expansion." He introduced me as the founder of the company who, due to age, had handed management over to the next generation. Unfortunately, Diego added, looking at me with feigned concern, Don Miguel can no longer actively participate in management due to health reasons, but I promise to continue his work with dignity. Everyone nodded, glancing at me with pity. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, recording every word on my device, waiting for the right moment. Diego, I suddenly said, do you remember when you used to steal candies from the cupboard as a boy? Mom bought them for the guests, and you'd secretly eat them. Then you swore it wasn't you. My son laughed. Dad, why bring that up? That was ages ago. I remember it like yesterday. You said, Dad, I didn't steal them, I swear. But your mouth was covered in chocolate. Well, childhood mischief. Every kid steals sweets. And do you remember what you told Lawyer Perez 3 weeks ago about me? Diego stiffened. What did I say? Father has completely lost his mind. We have to act before he goes insane for good. Exact words. October 15th, 7:47 p.m. The room fell silent. Everyone looked from me to Diego. My son turned pale. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I remember every conversation you've had for the last 3 months. I remember you telling your wife on October 20th, Patricia, he's really lost it. We may have to get him declared legally incompetent through the courts. I remember your meeting with the appraiser on October 25th, counting my assets. The old man built a solid business, 2 billion pesos plus real estate. Diego gripped his chair. I don't understand what you're saying. Oh, I understand everything. I stood up and pulled out a folder of documents. Here's a psychiatrist's certificate declaring me fully competent. Here are the results of all medical exams. Perfect memory, no signs of dementia. Here's the revocation of the power of attorney you obtained through deception. That's impossible. And here are the audio recordings of your conversations. I turned on the recorder. Listen for yourself. From the speaker came Diego's voice. The old man really built a solid business. Assets worth 2 billion pesos, plus real estate another 1.5 billion. Not a bad catch. The room gasped. Someone swore. The chief accountant buried her face in her hands. Where did you get those recordings? Diego shouted. I have recordings of all your conversations and meetings for the last 3 months. Video footage of you rifling through my documents in my absence. Copies of all the illegal transactions you carried out. Diego lunged for the recorder. You set me up. You set yourself up. I only gave you the chance to show who you really are. But you were sick. You forgot. You got confused. I was pretending. For 2 months, I acted the part to see what you would do. And I saw. Diego collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. Pretending? Every day, every minute, deliberately forgetting names, losing myself in the office, confusing people, and all the while you were plotting how to steal my business. Dad, I wanted to help. Help? I pulled out another folder. Here are the documents of your transactions. In 1 month, you sold assets worth 900 million pesos, transferred the money to shell companies. That's not help. That's outright theft. I acted under power of attorney, which you obtained fraudulently by convincing me I was ill. I turned to the others. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all heard it. My son spent 3 months spreading lies about my mental state, obtained a power of attorney under false pretenses, and stole hundreds of millions of pesos. The room erupted, some outraged, some shaking their heads. And now, I said, taking out my phone, it's time to conclude. I dialed the prearranged number. Eduardo, this is Martinez. You may enter. A minute later, Detective Castro and 2 police officers stepped into the conference hall. Diego Martinez? One officer addressed my son. You need to come with us to give testimony regarding large-scale fraud. The case went to trial 8 months later. During that time, Diego was under house restriction while I worked to rebuild the ruined business. It turned out my son had caused damage amounting to more than 1 billion pesos. Some of the money was recovered through frozen accounts, but much was lost forever. Diego denied everything to the very end. He claimed that I really had been ill, that the recordings were falsified, that he acted out of good intentions. He hired a skilled lawyer who tried to present the case as a family conflict, but the evidence was overwhelming. Medical certificates, audio and video recordings, witness testimony, banking documents all pointed against him. The most painful blow was my daughter's refusal to support me. Lucia sided with her brother, declaring that her father had cruelly set a trap for his own son. "Dad," she said at one of the hearings, "maybe Diego made mistakes, but he truly believed you were sick, and you deliberately deceived him." "Daughter," I replied, "if a man is ready to declare his own father insane for money, then something is wrong with that man." "But he's still your son. Are money and business more important than family?" "Ask him whether money is more important than family. He was ready to put me in a psychiatric ward." Lucia turned away and never spoke to me again. The day of the verdict was a cold March morning. Around 70 people filled the courtroom: company employees, acquaintances, journalists. Diego sat on the defendant's bench, aged and worn from the long months. Judge Valeria Mendoza carefully reviewed all case materials, heard the witnesses, examined the recordings. "Defendant Martinez," she addressed Diego, "you are charged with large-scale fraud committed by a group of persons using an official position. Do you plead guilty?" "I do not," Diego said firmly. "I acted in the interests of my father, who was ill." "Witness Martinez," the judge turned to me, "tell the court in detail about the events that led you to file a complaint with the prosecutor's office." And I told the story in detail without omitting a single fact. I spoke for 2 hours, citing precise dates, quoting conversations, describing each episode of my pretense. "You claim you remember everything absolutely accurately?" the judge clarified. "Yes, Your Honor. My memory has not failed me for a single moment." "Let's test that." The judge looked at the calendar. "November 23rd of last year, a Tuesday. What happened that day?" "November 23rd, I replied without hesitation. "In the morning, I arrived at the office at 9:15, met with supplier Garcia about a batch of LG refrigerators. We agreed on 80 units at 15,000 pesos each. At 11:30, I staged the scene with the lost glasses. They were on my head, but I looked for them for half an hour. Diego came into the office at 11:45, found the glasses, and suggested I see a doctor. At 14:20, he called lawyer Perez, complaining about my forgetfulness. At 1600, I met with chief accountant Marta to review the quarterly report. In the evening, I dined at home, watched the news. The lead story was about preparations for the year-end holidays. The judge checked the expert reports. Everything matched to the smallest detail. "Astonishing," she murmured. "Such accuracy of memory." Then Diego's lawyer spoke. "Your Honor, my client truly believed his father was ill. An elderly man begins to forget things, to get confused. What is unnatural about that? The son wanted to help. But the defendant never sought an official medical conclusion," the judge noted. "Instead, he immediately began transferring funds to his own accounts. He was trying to save the family business from collapse. By selling assets and pocketing the proceeds, it was only temporary. A temporary measure involving 1 billion pesos? The lawyer faltered, unable to respond. Then prosecutor Fernando Ortega took the floor. He carefully laid out the entire fraud scheme, showing how Diego systematically took control of his father's assets. Defendant Martinez, the prosecutor declared, did not use his father's supposed helplessness to care for him, but for personal enrichment. He obtained power of attorney through deception, spreading false information about the victim's mental state. After obtaining the authority, he immediately began withdrawing assets from the family business. The prosecutor read out the list of Diego's transactions. Sale of the store on Juarez Street for 170 million pesos. The funds transferred to the account of Inversiones del Norte, whose founder is the defendant's wife. Sale of the store on Reforma Avenue for 185 million, the money transferred to the defendant's personal account. Sale of the warehouse in the industrial zone for 240 million, the funds laundered through a chain of shell companies. The list was long and detailed. Every deal, every transfer was documented and proven. The total damage, the prosecutor concluded, amounts to 1,068 million pesos. This is large-scale fraud committed with abuse of official authority and falsified documents. When the prosecutor finished, there was a recess. Diego approached me. "Dad, I never meant to hurt you. I truly thought you were sick." "Son," I said, "if you cared about my health, you would have taken me to a doctor, not to a lawyer. From the very beginning, you thought only about money." "But I'm your son. Do you really want me to go to prison?" "I want justice, and justice means a thief must answer for his theft, even if that thief is your own son." After the break, the judge began reading the verdict. The courtroom fell silent. "The court has established," Judge Valeria Mendoza said, "that defendant Diego Martinez, knowing his father was fully competent, spread false information about his alleged mental illness. The goal was criminal, to gain control of the victim's property." "Dad," Diego whispered, turning toward me. "By exploiting his father's trust," the judge continued, "the defendant obtained a general power of attorney under false pretenses. He then systematically alienated the victim's assets, transferring funds to accounts under his control." Diego turned pale and clutched his chest. "The actions of the defendant caused the victim material damages amounting to 1,068,000,000 pesos and moral harm connected with the betrayal of a close relative." "I can't breathe," Diego wheezed. "Thus, the actions of the defendant are classified as large-scale fraud, committed by a group of persons with abuse of authority." Diego grabbed his chest, his face contorted with pain. "My heart! Dad, help!" The court sentences Diego Martinez to 6 years of imprisonment in a correctional colony with restitution of damages. Diego collapsed from his chair right in the courtroom. Panic erupted. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance!" I rushed to my son, tried to bring him back to consciousness. "Diego, son!" I held his head as he gasped for air, clutching at his chest. "Dad, forgive me. I didn't mean... Forgive!" The ambulance arrived. The doctors confirmed a heart attack. Diego was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He spent 3 weeks there. It was a massive infarction, and the doctors fought for his life. I visited him every day, despite his betrayal. "Dad," he said once he was able to speak again, "I know you'll never forgive me, but believe me, I didn't mean harm. It's just, the money got to my head." "I forgive you, son. You're still dear to me no matter what, but trust will have to be earned again." "I'll change. In prison, I'll rethink everything." "Think, son, and remember, you'll always remain my son." After his discharge, Diego was taken to serve his sentence. The doctors warned that his heart was now weak, that he had to take care of his health. But prison leaves no room for health. With my daughter Lucia, reconciliation never came. She believed I had been cruel to her brother, that everything could have been solved within the family, without court or prison. "Dad," she said at our last meeting, "he's not a stranger. He's your own son. Couldn't you forgive him?" "Daughter," I replied, "forgiveness and impunity are not the same thing. Diego committed a crime, a serious one. If I had stayed silent, he would have thought it was acceptable to cheat and steal without consequences. But now he's in prison and sick." "That's the consequence of his choices. I warned him. I gave him a chance to repent, but he chose money." Lucia left in tears and never returned. She wouldn't let me see my grandchildren. That was the hardest part, not only losing my son, but also my daughter and grandchildren. I rebuilt the business in a year and a half. I had to restore ties with suppliers, find new clients, regain the trust of partners. It was hard, starting almost from scratch at 76. But I managed. I opened new stores to replace the sold ones, expanded the product range, introduced modern sales technologies. By the end of the second year after the trial, the company was back to its former level. A year after the trial, I received an unexpected visitor, my grandson Alejandro, Lucia's son. He was 18, just starting university. "Abuelo," he said, "I want to talk to you." "About what, my boy?" "About what happened with Uncle Diego. Mom forbids me from seeing you, but I figured it out myself." Alejandro turned out to be a thoughtful young man. He analyzed the whole situation, studied the case materials, spoke with people. "Abuelo, you were right," he said. "Uncle Diego tried to cheat you, and you exposed him. That's justice. And what does your mother say?" Mom says family is more important than justice, but I think differently. If a relative commits a crime, that doesn't mean we should cover for him. Alejandro began visiting me regularly, helping with business, eager to learn, a bright boy, quick to grasp everything. Abuelo, have you thought about passing the business to me? He asked once. Too soon. First study, get your education, then we'll see. And if I live up to your expectations, then everything will be yours. On one condition, never betray family for money. I promise, Abuelo. 6 months later, something happened that changed my perspective on many things. My former secretary, Gloria, who had resigned right after the trial, came to see me. Don Miguel, she said, I need to tell you something. Something I kept silent about during the investigation. What is it? About your daughter, Lucia. She knew about her brother's plans too. I couldn't believe my ears. What are you saying? About 2 months before the trial, Diego met with Lucia. They talked for a long time at a cafe on Garibaldi Square. I happened to see them as I walked by. And then, later Diego told me that his sister agreed not to interfere. He said they made a deal. He would take over the business, and she would get the apartment and the summer house after your passing. I felt the ground slip from under my feet. So Lucia had also known of her brother's plans? She too was counting on my inheritance? Are you sure about what you're saying? Absolutely. Moreover, Lucia even gave her brother the number of her psychiatrist for a consultation on how best to prove your incompetence. It was a punch to the gut. It turned out both of my children had planned to divide me like an inheritance. Diego would take the business, Lucia the real estate, and I was to be locked away in a psychiatric ward or a nursing home. Why did you stay silent before? I was afraid. Diego asked me not to tell anyone. Then the trial started, and I thought, why add to your pain? And what made you speak now? Conscience. You're a good man, Don Miguel. You didn't deserve such betrayal from your children. After Gloria left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking. So Lucia hadn't simply sided with her brother out of family loyalty. She had been his accomplice from the very beginning. Now her behavior in court made sense. She wasn't defending her brother. She was protecting herself, afraid her role in the conspiracy might be revealed. I decided to verify Gloria's information. I hired a private investigator and asked him to uncover all the details of Diego and Lucia's meetings. The detective worked for a month and brought me a full report. It turned out the children hadn't just met once, but regularly for half a year. They discussed my illness, their plans to divide the inheritance, ways to isolate me. What's more, Lucia had indeed advised Diego on how best to prove my incompetence. Her husband, Carlos the surgeon, even offered to find doctors who, for money, would provide the necessary conclusion. In one recorded conversation, Lucia told her brother, Diego, the main thing is not to rush. If we put Dad in a psychiatric hospital immediately, it'll raise suspicion. Better to do it gradually so everyone can see how he's deteriorating. And in another, I'll take the apartment in Polanco and the country house in Cuernavaca. That's only fair. I'm the daughter, I have children. Take the business, I don't need it. So while I was pretending to be a sick old man, my children were already dividing up my inheritance. And Lucia was no less cynical than Diego. I decided to cut my daughter out of the will. If she thought I was a senile old man she could trick and rob, then let her receive her due reward. I made a new will with a different notary. I left everything to my grandson Alejandro on the condition that he care for my grave and preserve the family's memory. I also created a charitable foundation to help elderly people betrayed by their own children. I transferred 400 million pesos there. Let that money serve those who, like me, were deceived by family. I said nothing to Lucia about what I had discovered. Let her believe I was unaware of her role in the plot, but I stopped speaking with her. When she called occasionally, I was polite but cold. Dad, why are you treating me like this? I'm your daughter. Daughter, I would reply. Of course, my daughter. She didn't understand what I meant, but she didn't press. Diego served 4 of his 6 years, released early for good behavior. He came out older, grayer, with a sick heart. The first thing he did was come to my home. He stood at the door, hesitant to enter. May I come in, Dad? Come in, son. We sat at the table in silence for a long time. Then Diego spoke. I've thought a lot these years. I realized how low I had sunk. You gave me everything: education, work, the chance to provide for my family, and I repaid you with betrayal. Realizing it is good. Forgive me, if you can. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, I repent. I forgive you, Diego. You're my son, no matter what. And trust? Trust must be earned from the beginning. I'll try. Only, I don't know if anyone will hire me. The criminal record. I'll hire you at the company as a simple salesman. You'll prove you've changed. Diego wept. Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down again. And indeed, he began working as a simple salesman in one of the stores. He came on time, followed every instruction, never complained about the low salary. After a year, I promoted him to department manager. 2 years later, to deputy store director. Diego had changed. He became more serious, responsible, honest. Prison had broken him, taught him to value simple human bonds. Dad, he once told me, now I understand the worst thing isn't poverty, it's losing the people close to you. In prison, I thought I had lost you forever. You didn't lose me, son. Our relationship just changed. Became more honest? Yes, more honest. 5 years after the trial, I decided it was time to speak with Diego about what had never been revealed during the investigation, the full extent of Lucia's role in the conspiracy. We sat in my office, Diego reporting on the store's work. After his report, I said, Son, I think it's time we talked about why Lucia was never punished. But she didn't participate in the fraud. She did, and you know it perfectly well. Diego lowered his eyes. Dad, don't pretend. I knew everything from the very beginning. I knew you planned the plot together. I knew she advised you on how to prove my incompetence. I knew you had already divided the inheritance. She would take the apartment and the house, and you the business. Diego stayed silent, realizing there was no point in denying it. Why didn't I report her to the prosecutor? I continued. Because her role was more subtle. She was the ideologue. You were the executor. It would have been difficult to prosecute her legally. And now? Now nothing. Lucia has already received her punishment. She lost her father and her inheritance. And most importantly, she still doesn't know that I know everything. She lives in constant fear of exposure. And me? You've atoned for your guilt through honest work, repentance, and change. That's why I'm putting you back in the will. But remember, there won't be a second chance. Diego nodded. I understand, Dad, and thank you for not handing both of us over back then. Does Lucia know? She doesn't, and she mustn't. Let her deal with her conscience on her own. A year later, I had an unexpected encounter. I was walking downtown and saw Lucia. She was sitting in a cafe with another woman, chatting animatedly. My daughter noticed me and waved. I walked over. Dad, what a surprise! Lucia stood up and hugged me. It's been so long. Yes, it has, I agreed. This is my friend Sophia, she introduced her companion. And this is my father, the one I told you about. We exchanged greetings and I joined them at the table. How are you, my girl? I asked. Good, I'm working at a new clinic. The pay is decent. The kids are growing, studying. Carlos got a promotion. I'm glad for you. And how about you? Is the business thriving? Thriving. Diego helps me. Diego? Lucia's face tensed. He was released? Released. Works in the company now. He's become a good worker. You forgave him? I did. He repented. He changed. Lucia paused, then cautiously asked, And me? Did you forgive me? What's there to forgive? You did nothing wrong, I said calmly, but I sided with Diego at the trial. That was your right. You believed he was right. Yes, I did, Lucia sighed with relief. He's my brother. How could I not support him? I looked at my daughter and realized she still didn't know I knew of her role in the conspiracy. She thought she had fooled me then and was fooling me still. Dad, she said, maybe we can reconcile. Life is short. Why hold grudges? What grudges, daughter? I hold none against you. Really? Then why don't we see each other? I'm just busy with work. At my age, time is short. I see. Maybe you could visit us sometime? The kids miss their grandfather. I'll think about it, I replied. After meeting Lucia, I thought long and hard. My daughter truly believed she had deceived me, that I didn't know about her role in the scheme. She was comfortable living in that lie, but I decided I wouldn't expose her. Let her live with that burden. Lies and hypocrisy are punishment enough. My grandson Alejandro graduated with honors and joined the company. Intelligent, honest, hardworking, everything I lacked in my own children. Abuelo, he said on his first day at work, I won't let you down. I'll work honestly. I know, grandson, you're different. Different? You have what your mother and uncle never had. Conscience. Alejandro quickly adapted to the business and achieved excellent results. 2 years later, I appointed him my deputy. Diego didn't object. He understood his nephew was more worthy of the role. Dad, my son once told me, you're right to prepare Alejandro. He's better than Lucia and me. Why do you think that? Because he doesn't lie. My sister and I learned to lie from childhood. That's no excuse. Not an excuse, an explanation. We grew up in a different time, when it seemed you could take everything by force or trickery. Alejandro grew up in another world. Perhaps you're right. By the time I was 80, I gradually transferred management to my grandson. He turned out to be a natural leader, respected by employees, trusted by partners, acknowledged by competitors. Now I'm 85. Officially, I'm still the company's director, but in practice, Alejandro runs everything, and he runs it well. The business grows, develops, prospers. Diego has become my right hand. He fully redeemed himself through years of honest work. We reconciled truly, becoming not just father and son, but friends. With Lucia, the relationship remains strained. We occasionally meet at family gatherings, exchange words about the weather and health. She doesn't know she's been disinherited, and I won't tell her. She'll find out after my death. Sometimes I wonder, did I do the right thing back when I was 75? Maybe I should have simply talked to my children, explained that I saw and understood everything? But no, words would not have helped. Diego was convinced of his righteousness, and Lucia of her cunning. Only a harsh exposure could stop them. Diego learned the lesson and changed. Lucia did not. She still considers herself the victim of a cruel father. Everyone got what they deserved, and I got what I had dreamed of all my life, a worthy heir. Alejandro will continue the business, preserve the family's memory, and never disgrace the name. My story is coming to an end. My memory, by the way, is still the same. Excellent. I remember every day of that dramatic story of pretense. Every word, every look, every betrayal. People sometimes ask, do I regret exposing my own children? No, I don't. Truth is always better than lies, even if it's painful. Diego's grateful for the lesson. Dad, he tells me, you saved me from myself. If you hadn't stopped me then, I would have fallen even lower. Lucia does not thank me, but I don't expect thanks. Every person chooses their own path, honesty or deceit, conscience or gain. My grandson Alejandro sometimes asks, Abuelo, what would you have done if Uncle Diego and Mom hadn't fallen into your trap? If they had really cared for you? Then, I answer, I would have confessed the pretense and asked their forgiveness, and I would have been happy to discover I was wrong in my suspicions. And weren't you afraid of being wrong? I was, but I was more afraid of never knowing the truth. The truth turned out to be bitter, but now I know who is who, and I can peacefully face old age, knowing my life's work is in safe hands. At 75, I pretended to be losing my memory. At 85, I remember everything in the smallest detail, and I understand, memory isn't for holding grudges, but for remembering lessons. I learned mine. The closest people can turn out to be the farthest, and the farthest, the closest. Take care of one another, people. And remember, trust is easy to lose and very hard to regain, and honesty is worth more than any inheritance. Miguel Martinez died at the age of 89 in his own home, surrounded by his grandson Alejandro and his son Diego. Lucia came to the funeral but kept her distance. After the will was read, she discovered she had been disinherited. There was no scandal. Everyone understood why. Alejandro, as the sole heir, gave his aunt a modest sum from his own funds to support the children. The company Electron continues to operate and thrive. At the entrance to the main office hangs a portrait of its founder with the inscription, Miguel Martinez, Honesty Above Profit. Diego still works in the company. He says it is his way of atoning to his father. And the story of the feigned memory loss has become a parable in the city's business circles. They say some elderly businessmen, inspired by Don Miguel's example, also test their heirs. Whether that's true or just legend, no one knows. But the lesson remains timeless. Trust, but verify, especially when it comes to big money and those closest to you.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.